He had everything money could buy, except time to fix one fatal mistake, until a waitress with nothing to lose touched his laptop and changed both their lives forever. Hello beautiful souls and welcome to Ms. Love Stories channel, the place where love, drama, and unforgettable moments come alive. I'm so thrilled you're here, ready to dive into stories that will make your heart race, bring tears, and leave you believing in the power of love. Before we begin, I want to get to know all of you. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from, because in the next video, I'll give a special shout out to some of you amazing viewers from around the world. I can't wait to see how far our love story family reaches. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, so you never miss a single emotional journey. Get ready to feel, laugh, cry, and fall in love all over again, because every story we share here is for you. Now, the story begins. Rose. The city never slept, but that night, it held its breath. High above the glowing skyline, inside a glass-walled office that overlooked everything and everyone, McPherson stood frozen. The reflection staring back at him wasn't the man the world knew. Not the billionaire. Not the ruthless CEO. Not the man who never failed. But a man who had just lost everything, in one click. "Where is it?" he muttered, his voice tight, fingers trembling slightly over the keyboard. Again. Search. Nothing. His jaw tightened. His chest rose and fell with controlled fury. No, this isn't possible. The presentation file, the one he had spent months perfecting, the one that would seal a multi-billion-dollar deal by morning, was gone. Not misplaced. Not hidden. Gone. And for the first time in years, McPherson felt something unfamiliar crawl up his spine. Fear. Across the city, under flickering yellow lights and the soft clatter of cutlery, life looked very different. Inside a modest restaurant tucked between busy streets, Rachel moved quickly between tables, balancing trays with a quiet grace that came from years of practice, not comfort. "Table 6, your order," she said gently, placing down a plate with a small, tired smile. Her hands were steady, but her eyes carried stories. Long nights. Unpaid dreams. Responsibilities that never paused. "Rachel," her manager's voice snapped from across the room. "Focus. No mistakes tonight." "I won't," she replied softly. She never did. Because she couldn't afford to. Later that night, as the city lights dimmed just enough to reveal its shadows, fate began stitching two very different lives together. McPherson sat in the back seat of his sleek black car, staring blankly at his phone. Calls flooded in, assistants, partners, investors. He ignored them all. "Sir," his driver said cautiously, glancing in the mirror. "Should I head home?" McPherson hesitated. Home. What was home? When everything he built could collapse by sunrise. "No," he said finally. "Pull over. Anywhere." Minutes later, he stepped into the small restaurant. The bell above the door chimed softly. Rachel looked up. And for a brief second, their worlds collided. She didn't know who he was, but she saw it instantly. The tension in his shoulders. The storm behind his eyes. The kind of silence that screamed louder than words. "Welcome," she said gently, walking over. "Table for one?" McPherson gave a short nod, barely looking at her. He sat. She handed him a menu, but his mind was miles away. "You okay?" she asked quietly after a moment. He looked up sharply, almost offended by the question. But then, something in her tone. Not pity. Not curiosity. Just human. "I've had better nights," he said dryly. She gave a small smile. "Those are the nights people remember most." He didn't respond, but for the first time since the file disappeared, his breathing slowed. Minutes passed. Rachel noticed something else. His laptop. Open. Unattended. Screen flickering with error messages. Her brows pulled together slightly. "Excuse me," she said gently, pointing. "Your laptop, it's showing something." McPherson glanced at it, irritation flashing. "I know," he snapped. "It's nothing you can fix." She paused. Then quietly, carefully she said, "Sometimes, it's not about fixing. It's about seeing what others miss." He looked at her then. Really looked. And something unspoken passed between them. A moment. Fragile. Uncertain. Dangerous. Backhand index pointing right. Pause here for a second. Have you ever met someone who changed your life in just one moment? Without even knowing it? Speech balloon, tell me in the comments. I read every single one. McPherson leaned back, studying her. You work with computers? He asked, skepticism laced in his tone. Rachel hesitated. A shadow crossed her face. I used to, she said quietly. A long time ago. What happened? She forced a faint smile. Life happened. Silence fell between them again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was building. Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance. Inside, two lives stood on the edge of something neither of them could yet understand. McPherson closed his eyes briefly, then pushed the laptop slightly toward her. Fine, he said. Take a look. Rachel froze. Not because she doubted herself, but because she knew. Some moments change everything. And once you step into them, there's no going back. The moment didn't announce itself. It didn't come with music, or warning, or certainty. It came quietly, in the soft hum of a struggling laptop, in the steady breath of a waitress who had learned to hide her brilliance, in the restless silence of a man who had never needed anyone before. Rachel slowly pulled the laptop closer. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard, but didn't touch it yet. May I? She asked softly. McPherson leaned back in his chair, arms folded, his expression guarded. It's already gone, he said flatly. You can't make it worse. But his voice betrayed him. There was tension there. A crack beneath the surface. Rachel noticed it, but didn't call it out. Instead, she nodded gently and began. Her fingers moved carefully at first. Not rushed. Not hesitant. Just precise. Click. Pause. Scan. Her eyes narrowed slightly as lines of corrupted data flickered across the screen. McPherson watched her, skeptical at first. His gaze drifted, distracted, until something shifted. Her posture changed. Her focus deepened. And suddenly, she didn't look like a waitress anymore. She looked like someone who belonged in rooms he had spent his whole life building. What are you doing? He asked quietly, unable to hide his curiosity. Rachel didn't look up. Your file isn't gone, she murmured. It's hidden. McPherson scoffed. I've checked everything. Not like this, she replied. Her voice was calm, certain, and that unsettled him more than panic ever could. Seconds stretched into minutes. The restaurant noise faded into the background. Even the clinking of plates, the low chatter of customers, it all blurred. All that existed now was the screen, and the growing tension between them. Rachel's fingers moved faster now. A rhythm, a memory, a part of herself she had buried under years of survival, slowly coming back to life. Corrupted directory, she whispered under her breath. But not deleted. McPherson leaned forward. What does that mean? It means, she said, finally looking up at him, you didn't lose it. A beat. You just couldn't see it. His heart skipped. He didn't show it, but something inside him tightened. Don't, he said quickly, almost sharply. Don't give me hope if you're not sure. Rachel held his gaze. And for the first time, there was something stronger than softness in her eyes. There was truth. I don't speak unless I'm sure, she said quietly. Silence. Heavy. Electric. Her fingers hit one final sequence of keys. The screen flickered. Paused. And then, a folder appeared. McPherson froze. His breath caught midair. No, he whispered. Rachel clicked it open. File names flooded the screen. And right there, at the center of it all, was the presentation. For a moment, the world stopped. No sound. No movement. No distance between who he was and what he almost lost. McPherson leaned in, staring at the screen like it might disappear again if he blinked. That's it, he said, his voice low, disbelieving. Rachel nodded softly. You should back it up immediately. But he didn't move. He couldn't. Because something far more important than the file had just been restored. His control. His certainty. His world. All placed back into his hands by someone he would have never noticed. He looked at her then. Not as a waitress. Not as a stranger. But as something else entirely. Who are you? He asked. The question hung in the air. Rachel's expression shifted. A flicker of something deeper. Something guarded. I told you, she said gently. I'm just a waitress. But the lie didn't land. McPherson leaned back slowly, studying her with a new intensity. No, he said quietly. You're not. A pause. Then softer. You just saved me. Rachel looked down at her hands. Hands that had carried trays, cleaned tables, survived, and tonight, changed a life. Outside, the first drop of rain hit the pavement. Then another. And another. Until the sky opened up. Inside, something else was happening. Something quieter. More dangerous. A connection neither of them had planned. You should send it, she reminded him softly. McPherson nodded, finally snapping back. He quickly transferred the file, backing it up, emailing it, his movements sharp, efficient again. The CEO had returned. But something had changed. When he was done, he closed the laptop slowly, then looked at her again. You don't belong here, he said. It wasn't an insult. It was a realization. Rachel smiled faintly. Maybe, she replied. Or maybe this is exactly where I'm meant to be. That answer lingered. Because for the first time in years, McPherson didn't have a response. Backhand index pointing right. Let me ask you something. If you were in McPherson's position, would you walk away after this moment? Or would you want to know more about her? Speech balloon. Tell me honestly in the comments. The rain outside grew heavier. Neither of them moved. Neither of them left. Because deep down, they both felt it. This wasn't just a coincidence. This was the beginning of something neither of them could control. And somewhere between a lost file and a restored future, two lives had just crossed a line they could never uncross. The rain didn't stop. It poured harder, like the sky itself was trying to drown what had just happened inside that small restaurant. And maybe, in a way, both of them wanted that too. McPherson stood up. Too quickly. The chair scraped harshly against the floor, breaking whatever fragile silence had settled between them. I should go, he said. No warmth. No hesitation. Just distance. Rachel blinked, slightly taken aback, but she nodded. Of course. Her voice was calm, but her fingers tightened subtly around the edge of the table. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a thick stack of cash, and dropped it on the table. For the help. The words landed wrong. Heavy. Cold. Final. Rachel stared at the money. Then slowly she pushed it back toward him. I didn't do it for that, she said quietly. McPherson's jaw tightened. I know how the world works, he replied. Everyone does something for something. Rachel met his eyes. And for the first time, there was a quiet defiance there. Not everyone, she said. A beat of silence. Tense. Uncomfortable. McPherson let out a short breath, running a hand through his hair. He didn't like this feeling. This loss of control. This pull. You don't understand, he said, his tone sharper now. That file wasn't just a document. It was months of work. Millions on the line. I know, she cut in softly. That stopped him. She stood there facing him, not as a waitress now, but as someone who had seen pressure, loss, and survival in ways he couldn't imagine. I know what it means to lose something important, she added. Her voice dropped slightly. Something you can't replace. Something in her tone. It wasn't just empathy. It was experience. Pain. McPherson looked away first. Because suddenly, this conversation felt too close. Too real. And he wasn't ready for that. You helped, he said stiffly. I've acknowledged it. That's enough. But even as he said it didn't feel like enough. Rachel nodded slowly. If that's what you believe. The distance between them grew again. Not physically, but emotionally. Like two people who had just shared something powerful, and were now pretending it didn't matter. McPherson picked up the money again and slipped it back into his pocket. Take care of yourself, he said. A polite ending. A controlled exit. The kind he was used to. He turned to leave. Took one step. Then another. Why did you stop? Her voice came softly from behind him. He froze. Didn't turn. What? Rachel stepped closer, but kept a respectful distance. You were about to walk out of your own life, she said. before I touched that laptop. A pause. Why? The question hit deeper than it should have. McPherson clenched his jaw. That's none of your business. Maybe not, she admitted. But you asked who I am. A beat. Maybe I'm someone who notices things others don't. He turned then, slowly, and the look in his eyes wasn't anger. It was conflict. You think you understand me because you fixed a file? He asked, voice low. No, she said gently. I understand you because of the way you reacted when it was gone. Silence. You looked, she hesitated, choosing her words carefully, not like a man who lost a file. A pause. Like a man who had nothing left. That landed hard. McPherson's composure cracked, just for a second. But it was enough. Be careful, he said quietly. You're crossing a line. Rachel held his gaze. Maybe, she replied. Or maybe, you're just not used to people seeing you without your title. The air shifted. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Because the truth was standing right there between them. McPherson exhaled slowly and stepped back, rebuilding the walls he knew so well. I don't have time for this, he said. I have a meeting in a few hours that decides everything. Rachel nodded. Then you should go. He hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, like he wanted to say something else, ask something, stay. But he didn't, because staying meant feeling, and feeling meant losing control. So he turned and walked out into the rain. The door closed behind him with a soft chime. And just like that, he was gone. Rachel stood there, staring at the empty space he left behind. Her chest felt tight, not with regret, but with something harder to explain. Her manager's voice cut through the moment. Rachel, stop standing around, we're busy. She blinked, snapping back. Coming. She picked up a tray, moved again, smiled again, worked again, but something had shifted inside her, because for a brief moment, she had seen someone, not the billionaire, not the CEO, but the man underneath. And now, she couldn't unsee it. Outside, McPherson sat in his car, rain hitting the windows in steady rhythms. He stared straight ahead, hands clenched. Drive, he said. But as the car pulled away, his mind wasn't on the meeting, or the deal, or the millions waiting on him. It was on her. Her voice. Her eyes. Her words. You looked like a man who had nothing left. His grip tightened, because the part that unsettled him most wasn't that she said it. It was that she was right. The storm didn't pass. By morning, it had only grown worse. Lightning cracked across the sky as the city woke to flooded streets, stalled traffic, and a tension that felt heavier than the rain itself. Inside one of the most prestigious hotels downtown, executives in tailored suits gathered in a grand conference hall. Everything was ready. Everything, except certainty. McPherson stood near the glass windows, staring out at the storm. His reflection stared back again. Controlled. Composed. Untouchable. But inside, there was noise. Sir, they're ready for you, his assistant said cautiously. He nodded once. Let's get this over with. Minutes later, the room fell silent as he stepped forward. Projector on. Slides ready. Eyes watching. This was his world, where he never failed. But as he began, something felt off. A flicker. A hesitation. He clicked to the next slide. It lagged, then froze. A murmur spread across the room. McPherson's expression hardened. Give me a second. He clicked again. Nothing. His assistant rushed forward, whispering urgently, Sir, the system isn't responding. The room shifted. Doubt creeping in. Time ticking loudly. And suddenly, he was back in that moment. The night before. The lost file. The panic. His chest tightened. Fix it, one of the investors muttered under his breath. Another checked his watch. The pressure built. McPherson stepped back slightly, jaw clenched. Use the backup, he said sharply. His assistant hesitated. Sir, the backup file is corrupted. Silence. Heavy. Brutal. McPherson's mind went blank for half a second. Impossible. He had checked it. Sent it. Secured it. And yet, here he was. Again. standing on the edge of losing everything. The room began to unravel. Low conversations. Shifting chairs. Doubt growing louder. Mr. McPherson, one of the board members said, voice polite but firm. Perhaps we should reschedule. No, he cut in. Too fast. Too sharp. Because this wasn't just about business anymore. It was about something deeper. Control. Identity. Failure. He looked at the frozen screen. Then at the people in front of him. Then, without fully understanding why, his mind went to her. Rachel. Her calm voice. Her steady hands. Her words. Sometimes it's not about fixing. It's about seeing what others miss. He exhaled sharply, then made a decision that surprised even himself. Give me 10 minutes, he said. Before anyone could respond, he grabbed his laptop and walked out. Sir, his assistant called after him. Where are you going? But he didn't answer. Because for the first time in years, McPherson wasn't following a plan. He was following a feeling. Across the city, the restaurant was quieter than usual. The storm had kept most customers away. Chairs sat empty. Time moved slower. Rachel wiped down a table, her movements absent-minded. Her thoughts weren't on work. They were on him. She shook her head slightly, trying to refocus. Why does it matter? She whispered to herself. He's just another customer. But deep down, she knew that wasn't true. The bell above the door chimed suddenly. She looked up and froze. McPherson stood there, soaked from the rain, breathing slightly harder than usual, eyes searching for her. The moment stretched. You came back, she said softly. I need your help. No pride, no ego, just truth. Rachel blinked, surprised, not by the request but by the way he said it. What happened? She asked. My system crashed, he replied. The file, it's not opening properly. I don't have time to figure it out. A pause. I wouldn't be here if I had another option. She studied him. Not the suit, not the status, but the man. And what she saw wasn't desperation. It was trust. A fragile, unfamiliar trust. Okay, she said simply. No hesitation. She walked over, pulling out a chair. Sit. He did. Without question. And just like that, the distance between them disappeared again. But this time, it wasn't accidental. It was inevitable. Rachel opened the laptop, scanning quickly. Her brows furrowed. McPherson leaned closer. What is it? It's not just corruption, she said slowly. Something interfered with the file structure. A pause. Did you move it between devices? Yes, he said. Several times. She nodded. That explains part of it. Her fingers began moving again. Faster now. More confident. McPherson watched her closely. And this time, he didn't just see skill. He saw someone who had once belonged in a world like his. You didn't just used to work with computers, did you? He said quietly. Rachel didn't respond immediately. Because some truths were harder to revisit than others. Focus, she said instead, gently redirecting. But he didn't miss it. And neither did she. The rain outside continued to fall. But inside, something else was building. A connection no longer based on coincidence, but on choice. Backhand index pointing right. Let me pause you right here. If someone from a completely different world suddenly became this important in your life, would you trust it? Or would you run from it? Speech balloon, tell me honestly in the comments. Rachel hit a final command. The screen flickered again. McPherson held his breath. And then, the file opened. Perfect. Intact. Alive. Relief washed over him. Real. Unfiltered. You did it again, he said, almost in disbelief. Rachel leaned back slightly. It wasn't gone, she said softly. Just needed the right approach. He looked at her. And this time, there was no resistance in his eyes. Only realization. I can't do this without you, he admitted. The words surprised both of them. Rachel's breath caught slightly. Because this was no longer just about a file. This was something deeper. Something dangerous. Something real. And neither of them knew how far it was about to go. The storm outside softened. But inside, something heavier began to rise. McPherson didn't move. Even after the file opened. Even after the crisis passed. He just sat there, looking at Rachel. Not with urgency anymore, but with curiosity. "You said you used to do this," he said quietly. "That wasn't basic knowledge." Rachel closed the laptop gently, avoiding his eyes. "It was a long time ago." "How long?" She hesitated. And in that hesitation, lived years of silence. "Long enough for it not to matter anymore," she replied. McPherson leaned forward slightly. "It matters," he said. "A beat. It matters to me." That caught her off guard. Because people like him didn't usually say things like that. "Why?" she asked almost defensively. He didn't answer immediately. "Because the truth was uncomfortable. Because someone like you doesn't just disappear into a place like this," he said, glancing briefly around the quiet restaurant. Her lips pressed together. A faint, almost invisible reaction. "Maybe I didn't disappear," she said softly. "Maybe I just landed where life pushed me." Silence. McPherson studied her. He had spent his life reading people, negotiating, breaking through lies. And this wasn't a lie. It was something deeper. "Who were you?" he asked. Rachel looked up this time, and something in her eyes had changed. Not softness, not deflection. Truth. "I was someone who believed life was fair," she said quietly. The words lingered. McPherson frowned slightly. "That's not an answer." "It is," she replied. "Just not the one you want." A pause. Then slowly, she stood up. "Come," she said. McPherson blinked. "Where?" "You said you don't have time," she replied. "Let's not waste it." He hesitated, but then followed. Minutes later, they stood in the small back area of the restaurant. A quiet space. Away from everything. Rachel reached into her bag. Pulled out something worn. Folded. Carefully kept. She handed it to him. McPherson took it slowly. Unfolded it. And froze. It was a certificate. First-class honors. Computer engineering. His eyes flicked to the name. "Rachel." "You," he started, then stopped. "Yes," she said softly. He looked at her again. Really looked. "You were at the top," he said, almost in disbelief. She gave a faint smile. "Once." "What happened?" he asked again. But this time, his voice was different. Softer. Rachel looked down at her hands. And for the first time since they met, they trembled slightly. "My father got sick," she said quietly. The words came slowly, carefully, like something fragile being uncovered. "He was everything," she continued. "The only person who believed I could be more." A pause. "I had to choose." McPherson didn't interrupt. "School or him," she said. The answer was obvious. "I chose him." Silence filled the room. "He needed treatment," she added. It wasn't cheap. A faint hollow laugh. "And life doesn't pause just because you have dreams." McPherson felt something tighten in his chest. "I worked," she said. "Anywhere. Everywhere." Nights turned into years. A pause. By the time he was gone, her voice broke slightly, but she held it together. Everything else was too. The words hung in the air. McPherson looked down at the certificate again, then back at her. "You gave it all up," he said quietly. Rachel shook her head. "No," she replied. "I just didn't have the luxury to keep it." That hit him. Harder than anything else she'd said. Because luxury was something he had always had. Time, money, choice. Things she never did. "You never went back?" he asked. She smiled faintly. A sad kind of acceptance. "Life doesn't always give second chances," she said. McPherson exhaled slowly. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel powerful. He felt aware. "Rachel." The manager's voice called from the front. "Where are you?" She wiped her eyes quickly, composed herself. "I have to go." She turned to leave. "Wait." She stopped. McPherson stepped forward slightly. "You said life doesn't give second chances," he said. A pause. "What if it does?" Rachel didn't turn around. Because she knew. That question wasn't simple. "It doesn't," she said softly. then walked away, leaving him there, holding a piece of her past, and a truth he couldn't ignore. Back in the front, Rachel moved like nothing happened, serving, smiling, working. But inside, everything was shifting, because for the first time in years, someone had seen her, not as she was, but as she used to be, and maybe, as she could be again. McPherson stepped back into the main area slowly, his mind racing. The deal, the meeting, the pressure, all of it still mattered. But now, there was something else, something personal. He walked toward the door, then paused. Rachel. She looked up. Their eyes met again. You didn't just save my presentation, he said. A beat. You reminded me what it means to lose something that matters. Her expression softened slightly. Then don't lose it again, she replied. Simple words, but heavy. He nodded once, then left. But this time, he didn't feel like he was walking away from her. He felt like he was walking toward something. Backhand index pointing right. Let me ask you something before we move on. Do you believe life truly gives second chances? Or do we have to fight to create them ourselves? Speech balloon. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your story. Because what's coming next will test both of them in ways they never expected. The storm finally passed, but something it left behind was far more powerful than destruction. The deal was a success. Massive, historic, unshakable. By the end of the day, the same room that once held doubt now echoed with applause. Brilliant recovery, Mr. McPherson. Impressive as always. Exceptional work. McPherson nodded politely, shaking hands, accepting praise, playing the role the world expected. But inside, he wasn't there, because every victory that day felt incomplete. Not because of the deal, but because of who wasn't there to see it. That evening, the city looked calmer. Lights reflected on rain-washed roads. The air felt new, and without overthinking it this time, McPherson returned. The bell above the restaurant door chimed again. Rachel looked up, and this time, she didn't look surprised. You came back, she said softly. McPherson gave a faint smile. Looks like I'm making it a habit. Something about that felt different. Not urgency, not crisis. Choice. He sat down, same table. But nothing about this moment felt the same. Rachel walked over, but slower this time. Less guarded. So, she said, folding her arms lightly. Did the world end? He let out a quiet chuckle. No. A pause. But it almost did. She smiled faintly. I figured. Silence settled between them again. But this time, it wasn't tense. It was comfortable. You were right, he said after a moment. Rachel raised an eyebrow slightly. That's rare to hear from someone like you. He nodded. I don't say it often. A beat. But I mean it when I do. She studied him. And for the first time, she saw less of the CEO. And more of the man. Sit, he said suddenly. She blinked. I'm working. For 5 minutes, he replied. The world won't collapse. She hesitated. Looked around. Then slowly pulled out the chair across from him. A small decision. But it meant something. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, why did you come back? She asked. McPherson didn't answer immediately. Because the truth wasn't simple. I've spent my whole life surrounded by people, he said slowly. Employees, partners, investors. A pause. But not one of them would have done what you did. Rachel looked down slightly. It wasn't a big deal. It was, he said firmly. A beat. It still is. She let that sit. Then changed the subject, gently. Did you eat? He blinked. Caught off guard. No, he admitted. She stood up. Then that's the first problem we fixed tonight. Minutes later, she returned with a simple plate. Nothing extravagant. But warm. Real. McPherson looked at it. Then at her. You made this. She nodded. Don't overthink it. Just eat. He did. And for the first time in what felt like years, he wasn't eating for convenience. Or time. Or image. He was just eating. Good, she asked. He looked up. And gave a small nod. Yeah, A pause. Better than most things I've had in a long time. She smiled. Not wide, but real. The conversation began to flow. Slowly. Naturally. What about you? He asked. Do you always work this late? She shrugged. Late, early, whenever needed. A faint smile. Bills don't wait. McPherson leaned back slightly. You shouldn't be here. She sighed lightly. Not you too. No, he said quickly. I don't mean it like that. A pause. I mean you deserve more. Rachel looked at him, and something in her eyes softened. Deserve is a dangerous word, she said quietly. Why? Because it makes you expect things life doesn't promise. He frowned slightly. And settling doesn't. That made her pause. Because he wasn't wrong. You ever think about going back? He asked. To what? To who you were. Rachel let out a soft breath. I try not to, she admitted. Because thinking about it. A pause. Hurts more than it helps. McPherson leaned forward slightly. What if it didn't have to? She looked at him. Carefully. Why are you doing this? She asked. The question was direct. Real. He didn't look away. Because I see you, he said. Silence. And I think, he continued slowly, you've been invisible for too long. That hit something deep inside her. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Because no one had ever said that before. Not like that. Not with truth. McPherson, she started then stopped. It was the first time she said his name. And it changed something. You don't know what you're asking, she said softly. Then help me understand, he replied. A long pause. Rachel looked down at her hands again. Then back at him. I'm tired, she admitted. Not physically. Emotionally. Tired of starting over. Tired of hoping. Tired of losing. Her voice trembled slightly. And what if this, she gestured lightly between them, is just another thing I lose? The vulnerability in her voice was raw. McPherson didn't answer immediately. Because this wasn't business. This wasn't logic. This was heart. You won't, he said finally. She gave a small, sad smile. People always say that. I'm not people, he replied. A beat. I'm someone who doesn't walk away from things that matter. Their eyes locked. And in that moment, something fragile formed. Not a promise. Not certainty. But possibility. Outside, the city lights flickered softly. Inside, two people sat across from each other. No longer strangers. No longer distant. But not yet safe. Because what they were building was real. And real things could break. Backhand index pointing right before we go into the most intense part of this story. Have you ever been afraid to open your heart again because of your past? Speech balloon, tell me in the comments. I read every one. Because what's coming next will test everything they've started to feel. The night felt too calm for something that was about to break. McPherson sat in his office, staring at his phone. Rachel's last words echoed in his mind. What if this is just another thing I lose? He had told her she wouldn't. He believed it when he said it. But belief and reality had never always been on the same side of his life. Across the city, Rachel lay on her small bed, staring at the ceiling. Sleep refused to come. Her mind replayed every moment from the past few days. The way he looked at her, the way he listened, the way he said her name like it mattered. It scared her. Not because it wasn't real, but because it felt too real. The next morning came fast. McPherson had just finished a high-level meeting when his assistant rushed in, her face tense. Sir, there's something you need to see. She handed him a tablet. His expression darkened as he read the headline. Billionaire CEO linked to mystery woman before major deal. Questions raised about data breach. Below it was a blurred photo. Him. And Rachel. At the restaurant. His jaw tightened. This is ridiculous, he muttered. But the damage was already unfolding. Investors were calling. Board members were questioning. Rumors were spreading that the recovered presentation might have been compromised. That someone from outside had accessed confidential information. And that someone was her. Meanwhile, Rachel walked into work, unaware. Until she noticed the stares. The whispers. The tension. Her manager stormed toward her. What did you do? She froze. What? He shoved his phone toward her. You think this is a joke? You've been meeting with some billionaire behind our backs? Now reporters are calling here. Her eyes widened as she read the article. Confusion turned into shock. Then into something deeper. Fear. I didn't do anything wrong, she said, her voice shaking slightly. That's not what it looks like, he snapped. You're bringing trouble here. I can't have that. Please just listen. You're done for today, he cut in sharply. Actually, don't come back until this clears up. The words hit like a slap. Rachel stood there, frozen. Everything she feared was happening again. Loss. Without warning. Without fairness. She turned slowly and walked out, her chest tight, her thoughts spinning. Back in his office, McPherson was already on the phone. This is a misunderstanding, he said firmly. She has nothing to do with any breach. Then explain the timing. One of the board members shot back. Explain why an outsider had access to your device hours before a critical deal. His silence gave them room. Too much room. We need to protect the company, another voice added. Distance yourself from her. Immediately. McPherson's grip tightened on the phone. No. The word came out low. Final. But the pressure didn't stop. This isn't personal, they continued. It's business. That was the problem. To them, it was business. To him, it wasn't anymore. He ended the call abruptly and grabbed his keys. He knew where she would be. Or at least, where she used to be. But when he got to the restaurant, she wasn't there. Where's Rachel? He asked quickly. The manager scoffed. You've done enough already. McPherson's expression hardened. Where is she? She's not working here anymore, he replied coldly. Thanks to you. Those words hit harder than anything else that day. McPherson stepped back slightly. For the first time since the chaos began. He felt it. The consequences. Not for himself. For her. He left immediately. Meanwhile, Rachel sat alone at a bus stop, the sky gray above her. Her phone buzzed. Unknown numbers. Messages. Notifications. She ignored them all. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. She was tired. So tired. Of building something, only to watch it fall apart. Again. A car pulled up in front of her. She didn't look up. Rachel. She froze. That voice. She slowly lifted her head. McPherson stood there, breathing slightly heavy, eyes filled with something she hadn't seen before. Desperation. Please, he said. Get in. We need to talk. She stood up, but didn't move toward the car. Instead, she looked at him with pain, disappointment, and something deeper. You said I wouldn't lose this, she said quietly. I know, he replied. And you won't. I already did, she cut in. Silence. You walked into my life, she continued, her voice trembling. Made me feel seen, made me believe maybe things could be different. A tear slid down her cheek. And now look at what's happening. It's not what it looks like, he said quickly. They're twisting things. I'm fixing it. Fixing it, she echoed. A small, broken laugh escaped her. You can fix your company, your deals, your reputation. A pause. But can you fix what this has done to me? He didn't have an answer. Because this wasn't something money or power could undo. I didn't ask for this, she said softly. I didn't ask to be pulled into your world. Her voice dropped. I was fine being invisible. That's not true, he said. It is now, she replied. The words cut deep. McPherson stepped closer. Rachel, listen to me. No, she said, stepping back. A clear line drawn between them. This is exactly why I didn't want to hope, she continued. Because hope leads to this. Her chest rose and fell sharply. Losing. Silence stretched between them. Heavy. Unbearable. I was wrong, he said quietly. She looked at him. I thought I could control everything, he continued. But I can't. A pause. And I never wanted you to get hurt. But I am, she replied. Simple. Honest. Final. The words settled like dust after destruction. McPherson stood there, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Helplessness. Real crushing helplessness. Rachel wiped her tears and took a step back. Then another. He thought about the shatter point. How quickly connection could turn to distance, trust to fear. How one moment of hope could be erased by a single misunderstanding, a single headline. And yet he remembered her words. Because hope leads to this. Losing. He realized that she wasn't just scared of losing him. She was terrified of being hurt again. And she had every right to feel that way. She had fought her entire life for survival, for family, for meaning. The life she chose had never offered comfort or certainty, only responsibility. And now he had appeared, unintentionally, uncontrollably, in the spaces she had built for herself. He exhaled sharply, gripping the wheel harder. Decisions he'd made 100 times in a boardroom felt meaningless here. This was a choice that couldn't be calculated, analyzed, or delayed. It demanded courage, vulnerability, truth. He thought about the file, about the presentation. How trivial it seemed now. He had asked her to help him, and she had saved everything. And yet in doing so, she had also exposed herself, opened herself, placed a piece of her life in his hands. And he hadn't protected it. Not from the world, not from himself, not from the consequences that came from his world crashing into hers. The night pressed on. He sat in silence, shadows falling across his face from the streetlights outside the car window. Every scenario played in his head. Walk away. Protect her from himself, from his world. Stay safe, stay distant, preserve the order of life as it was. Or reach out. Admit his feelings. Take responsibility for the chaos, even if it meant more risk. Even if it meant he could fail, or lose again. His heart pounded as he weighed both choices. Pride, control, fear, they whispered loudly. But deeper, quieter. There was a pull he could no longer ignore. It was a gravity stronger than reason, stronger than logic. It was the simple, undeniable truth. He wanted her in his life. Not as an employee. Not as a helper. Not as someone convenient. He thought about her smile, her hands on the laptop, the way she had stood up to him in Act 3, the raw honesty of her backstory in Act 5. He thought about the bond they had built in Act 6, the fragile, healing connection that promised something real. And he knew, if he didn't act now, if he didn't choose, he would lose her forever. Not to the headlines, not to circumstance, but to doubt, to fear, to the walls people build around their hearts. McPherson started the engine. Rain still glistened on the road as he drove through quiet streets. His mind replayed the path she had taken away from him. He knew exactly where she might be. The little park she sometimes walked to at night. The small coffee shop where she went to think. Places that grounded her. Places that reminded her she existed beyond the world's demands. Finally, he found her sitting alone on a park bench, hands clasped, eyes staring at the wet pavement. She looked fragile, strong, guarded, human. Everything he had come to care about. He stepped closer, slow, deliberate, careful. She didn't turn immediately. But he didn't stop. Rachel, he said, voice low, unshakable. Her eyes flicked up, wary, exhausted. Why are you here? She asked softly, almost trembling. I'm here, he replied slowly, because I need to choose. And I choose you. Her gaze widened. You mean that? I do, he said. All of it. The risk. The chaos. The world crashing around us. I choose this. I choose you. And if you'll let me, I'll fight for us. A tear slid down her cheek. I don't know if I can trust this, she whispered. Not after everything. Not after what happened. He stepped closer, keeping his voice gentle. I'm not asking for blind trust. I'm asking for a chance. To prove that some things are worth it. Worth the risk. Worth the fight. Worth keeping. Even when life tries to take them away. The air between them was thick, saturated with rain-soaked tension. With longing and fear and hope. She studied him, the truth of his words sinking in. Finally she exhaled a small fragile sound. He reached out, just a hand, not forcing, just offering. She looked at it. Hesitated. Then slowly, tentatively, placed her hand in his. The weight of that small gesture, the surrender, the acceptance, the beginning, settled over them both. McPherson squeezed gently. I won't let go this time. Rachel looked into his eyes, letting herself believe, letting herself hope. And in that choice they both understood. Some risks were worth taking, some hearts worth trusting, and some connections worth saving, no matter how fragile or improbable. The world could wait. Tonight, there was only this. Only them, and the quiet promise that this time, they wouldn't lose each other. The morning sun filtered through the clouds, casting golden streaks across the city streets. The storm was gone. The world had returned to its rhythm, unaware of the night's upheaval, unaware of the fragile, emotional battles fought in quiet corners and rain-soaked streets. But for McPherson and Rachel, nothing would ever be the same. McPherson drove slowly, hands steady on the wheel, though his mind was racing. He thought of the last 48 hours, the chaos of the lost file, the headlines, the fear, the miscommunication. Every moment had pushed them to the edge. Every moment had shown him what mattered most. And now, after choosing her in the park, he felt both weight and liberation. Love was a risk, he reminded himself. A calculated risk that couldn't be measured by contracts or numbers. He arrived at the restaurant where it all began. The place was quiet in the late morning. A few early customers sipping coffee, reading papers, unaware of the emotional storm that had once flooded its small tables. Rachel was already there, behind the counter, moving with her usual composed efficiency. She looked up as he entered. Their eyes met. That long loaded glance. Not of strangers. Not of acquaintances. But of two people who had been through fire, and were still willing to reach for each other. McPherson approached slowly, deliberately, and stopped just a few feet from her. The air was filled with faint aromas of coffee and baked bread, comforting and grounding. He wasn't here as a CEO. Not as a man needing her assistance. He was here as McPherson, the man who had chosen to fight for this fragile, extraordinary connection. "Rachel," he said softly, voice firm yet vulnerable. "Can we talk?" She nodded, eyes cautious but curious. "Yes." He motioned toward a small table near the window. She joined him, folding her hands over her lap, heart still beating fast. For a long moment neither spoke. The weight of the last few days hung between them, tangible, almost suffocating. Finally, McPherson broke the silence. "I should have protected you from the chaos," he said quietly. "From the headlines, from the misunderstanding, from everything that could have hurt you. And I didn't." Rachel met his gaze. "You didn't know. And I didn't expect you to." He leaned forward slightly. "But I do now. I know what matters. And I know that losing you, is not something I can endure." Tears gathered in her eyes, a mix of relief, vulnerability, and something softer. "Hope. McPherson," she whispered. "This isn't just about you or me. The world isn't quiet. Life, it doesn't pause for people like us." He nodded, understanding every word. "I know. That's why I'm not asking for pause. I'm asking for trust. A chance to be part of your life. Not just in moments of crisis, but in ordinary, quiet moments too. The mornings. The evenings. The small victories. The failures. I want to be there for it all." Her hands trembled slightly as she reached across the table. "You really mean that?" "I do," he replied, eyes unwavering. "I've spent my life controlling outcomes, controlling people, controlling everything except what matters most. I can't control the world, Rachel, but I can choose to fight for us. Every day. And that's a promise I intend to keep." A silence settled over them, heavy with the significance of unspoken feelings, past pain, and new beginnings. Slowly, she placed her hand over his. That simple gesture, so small, yet monumental, spoke volumes. Acceptance. Hope. Vulnerability. Trust. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Scared that something will always tear us apart. That life won't let us have this." He squeezed her hand gently. "Then we face it together. Whatever comes. Because some things, some people, are worth every risk." Her lips quivered into a faint smile. "I've never been offered that before. And I've never asked for anyone like you before," he said, a soft grin tugging at his face. "But now I know. I'll never let you go." The restaurant around them moved at its usual pace, oblivious to the quiet resolution taking place in its corner. But for McPherson and Rachel, time seemed to stretch, as if granting them this one long, perfect moment to simply exist together. Outside, the sunlight grew warmer. A gentle breeze drifted through the open window, brushing Rachel's hair and lifting the weight of doubt from both their hearts. McPherson leaned back slightly, watching her. Do you know what this feels like? To finally come through all the chaos, all the mistakes, all the fear, and find something real waiting for you. Her eyes glistened. It feels like being seen. Really seen. He smiled softly. Then you see me too. She nodded. I do. And in that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the headlines. Not the lost files. Not the world outside. Just them. Two people who had stumbled, resisted, broken, and chosen each other anyway. McPherson reached out, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. It's just the beginning. Rachel took a deep breath, letting herself finally believe. Then let's make sure it lasts. No more running. No more walls. He nodded, a promise in his eyes. No more walls. They sat together, hands intertwined, hearts aligned. The chaos of the past was behind them, the uncertainty of tomorrow still ahead. But together, they felt invincible. And in the quiet sunlit restaurant, two hearts that had been lost and broken found their home. Love at last. Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. Your time, your support, and your presence here mean more than words can say. If this story touched your heart, inspired you, or kept you watching, please make sure to subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss a new upload. Until next time, stay blessed, stay strong, and keep believing in love. See you in the next story.